Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at our ROI of Information Governance this morning. It's presented by Western Integrated Systems. And we are celebrating our 41st year as a digital transformation partner to you. We have the content on the screen here, but what that means to you in real terms is that Western Integrated Systems was there when the first barcode was applied to a file box or a file folder to track the activity of that information within an enterprise. And we've worked with our customers through those 41 years to enable them to use robotic process automation to, again, track activity, but then also to go through all of your different information silos to find records that need to be disposed of. That's always been a very difficult task in information governance and records management programs to find all of the copies. So our experience in this realm of understanding where information can be, how it can be named, what formats it can be in, really does help our clients find their stuff and get rid of it when they need to get rid of it, or keep it if they need to keep it. So we'll get into a little bit of the whys in this presentation this morning. If you have any questions as we go through this, please feel free to put them in the chat. So I'm Cheryl Ahrens-Young, and I've been active in this realm almost as long as Western Integrated has been around. I started out at Tab Products. So for those of you who are familiar with the healthcare industry and their filing systems, that was Tab's claim to fame in color coding and, again, putting those barcodes on folders. And as the years have gone by, I've developed specific expertise in information governance and in finding ways to enable customers to identify their information so it can be tracked through the enterprise and managed and disposed of appropriately. Okay, so one of the challenges that we have seen with COVID, which if you're familiar with the disaster levels, ranks right in there as a 4 or 5 in terms of the impact on companies. A lot of us are working remotely. I'm working remotely right now from my house. And we are creating and storing and sharing information in new ways as well as the old. So we've got the Teams meeting that we're on right now, and we have chats, and we have Slack and Jira, and all those different types of ways of meeting that we had in the past. I mean, WebEx has been around for a while, and GoToMeeting's been around for a while, but they weren't seen as critical as they are now to keeping companies going. So that collaboration and productivity are critical to getting work done, but you still need to ensure that the information remains accessible and safe. One of the concerns that lawyers brought up during the beginning of COVID was, okay, you have people, particularly lawyers, working at home, and their significant other is there in the room with them who doesn't work for that law firm, but they're hearing what is happening in the discussions of litigation or contract negotiations, that type of thing. And how do you make sure that that information is safe and protected? That's been one of their challenges. Not that they've been able to address it completely, but it's an awareness that's out there. Okay, so where is your information? It's on servers, it's on PCs, it's on laptops, tablets, smartphones, external hard drives. Some of you may still be working with CDs and DVDs, and filing cabinets, that paper storage or microforms, and then offsite storage, stuff at Iron Mountain, stuff that might be in a U-Store-It facility. And then you have cloud repositories, and you may have cloud repositories that you, as a records manager, don't know about. Someone may have set up their own Google Drive because it's convenient, right? And they have company documents on there that you may not know about. Their social media, things that are posted by the company on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or YouTube can become a record if there's the implied promise in that someone thinks the company didn't meet. And then search engines. These are important around CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, in that it keeps a lot of information in the Google search and your other types of search engines as they're like sticky, so that's why when you're going in to do another search for something, you get all these pop-ups for things that you've searched for before, because your information is in those search engines, and that has to be managed. And then collaboration sites between entities. If you're going through a merger or an acquisition or a divestiture of one of your units, there's usually a collaboration site between the two entities to share documents, which may become records, which may show intent. And then your support and help desks. These have been a good source of information for the training department. What are the common questions that come up on a support desk or the help desk that employees are struggling with, a particular process or an application that you might have. This is something that there's no legal retention required for a support or help desk, but you might want to have something in your retention schedule about that so that HR training has access to that. And then chatbots, those are becoming more prevalent, especially in customer service applications. And your vendor portals, so like the FedEx and UPS portals that you might have. Amazon, whatever you use that has information in there about you or about your organization needs to be managed. And then again, web meeting chats, like what we'll have here today. So those are all things to consider when you're figuring out where your records are, because they could be everywhere. So part of a records and information governance program and the role that manager plays is to identify the information silos. So the tools to find information in one search, that's an important part of what we do when managing records. You've got your system of record, but then, like I mentioned, people can put stuff in their share drives. They can have something on their phone. They've downloaded something, a PDF, onto their phone that's business related, or onto a tablet, or they've printed something that then needs to get scanned back in and put where they can be found. Where are all those silos of information? How do you find them? And then when you do it right, you're improving efficiency. You have less time searching for the right information, for the current information and the information that decisions can be made upon, and good decisions, right? You want to make sure that you're getting the whole picture so that decision that you're making is a good decision. And then we get down to the part where a lot of organizations just kind of let it go. They fall down on the job in incorporating the say it, do it, prove it as a defensible process. This is what you're going to do. And then you put in the tools in place so that your employees can actually do it without workarounds or gaps or just not getting it done at all. And you can prove that you've done what you said you were going to do. That's not easy to do. There's a lot around putting that type of documentation, the desktop instructions, the procedures, the reporting, the audit worksheets to show that you are doing what you said you were going to do. And then what's very top of mind to most organizations, especially IT, is that information security. Who touched it? What did they do with it? And when did they do it? Did they have rights to do it? If they did something that they weren't supposed to do, does that get escalated? Is someone notified immediately, or is it more of a month-end report that, someone notices, hey, they shouldn't have done that? So all that's incorporated into a comprehensive records and information governance program, and the manager oversees that. And when you do all this right, you've got that program in place, and you know where your information is and who's touched it and what they did with it, you can avoid risk of incarceration. That's one of the ROIs of information governance, that when it's not done right. Okay. This happens most frequently right now in our current environment with HIPAA violations, because HIPAA has matured enough that the assumption is of the governing bodies, which is at the federal level, but also at the state levels, that everybody should know what they need to do to protect health information. And health information falls under workers' comp information. Everybody's got some sort of workers' comp file around an employee. If someone's, had any kind of an accident, or they've gone out on some disability leave, you have that information and you need to protect it. Okay. Just recently, there was someone who was fined, for violating HIPAA. It's like they should have known what to do with the health information, but they didn't do it. Now, the corporation that this happened in was fined. It was a civil penalty, but the individual who was found to actually inappropriately use that health information was put in jail for 4 years. So, and that's fairly common, that the HIPAA violation results in somebody going to jail. I don't think anybody on the call wants to go to jail. So you need to make sure that your program addresses how to protect any kind of health information that you may have in your systems. Another story that I had was that with Britney Spears, back in the day when HIPAA was first coming to be a fairly common infraction, the person who sold her information to that tabloid was put in jail for 5 years and was fined $250,000, and they had to give back the money that they received from the tabloid. Within Cedars-Sinai itself, 7 or 8 people were fired for that. Cedars-Sinai had to pay a fee. That's close to $500,000. And that the woman who sold the information to the tabloid, her husband was also found to be guilty of an infraction. So it's a serious issue. You need to protect that information so that people who don't have access to it or shouldn't have access to it can't get to it. So we have also within the financial area of records management, Sarbanes-Oxley. So if you're a large organization governed by the SEC, you have to abide by SOX, as it's commonly called. Many, many states, I think 49 of the 50, have adopted SOX requirements. So for the larger corporations in their states. So you do have to be aware of your accounting procedures and maintaining those records. So you've got the working papers that the accountants have when they're doing their audits. Those have a retention period, as well as the final audit report that's been filed. So both of those are considered records under Sarbanes-Oxley, and they need to be kept for 5 years. And again, HIPAA. And it is spelled HIPAA, the Health Information Privacy and Accountability Act. So not HIPPO. And then there's Graham-Leach-Bliley, that you must identify reasonable and foreseeable internal and external threats that could result in unauthorized disclosure, misuse, alteration, or destruction of customer information. And that's any enterprise, not just the larger ones. And then there's the GDPR, which is a privacy act from the European Union that a lot of states in the US are adopting or modifying to suit their own needs. So in California, we have the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, which is morphing into the Consumer Rights Privacy Act, which requires a company who has clients in California, not necessarily a company that is incorporated in California, get rid of client information when that client requests it, and to be able to prove that they've actually done that. So there's a process that you need to put in place, and in order for that to be defensible in California for not getting rid of some type of information, you have to have a records retention schedule and a records program policy that states what you do when someone requests to be forgotten. So for instance, if you're in the middle of a contract with them or in the middle of providing services to them, you don't get rid of their information, you don't delete it until after that activity is done. But you have to keep track of the fact that they asked for it. Okay, Utah, Massachusetts, and Vermont are adopting similar types of requirements of the right to be forgotten. And they're, they will come in and audit you to make sure that you're doing it. So return on investment within information governance and records management. Historically, records management has been perceived as a cost center, right? It doesn't seem to have any kind of value other than maybe keeping the place looking clean because things are filed neatly. But really, well-executed information governance is cost avoidance. Okay, so if you're not keeping track of copies, everybody's got the same system of record that they're going to get the information that they need. It's there for them, it's current. If they need to look at prior versions, you can keep track of versions as necessary, but the most current information is what they've got to work with, and the most current document is there for them to view. This also avoids having to settle in litigation. We had a client who didn't have a document management system or a content management system when we started with them. And instead of going to court when they were being sued as the deep pockets in any particular type of project, they would just offer to settle for $50,000 per. And they were settling 2 or 3 times a month for these irritating lawsuits that they were being pulled into. So we were able to instead give them a document management system to put all those records in so they could find them and prove that they had no fault at that. So they were able to avoid all of those settlements once we got them up and running. The total project time for them was about 18 months because we had to inventory their records and get them scanned in. And we literally found records out in the middle of the field in a construction trailer that we had to get to a scanning center and put them in. And this is an actual picture of another client's file room. You can tell if you look carefully in the back behind that first black table there, that there are binders and then folders stacked on top of the binders. This was literally a file it and forget it type of place. But we cleaned them up and they moved on and they're happy now. They can find what they're looking for. So information governance is end-to-end. So it's from the time that you create that document or you receive it. So it can start, within you're typing up a Word document, or you're in Excel, or you're in Google Docs, or you're in the mailroom, or you're looking in your email box. From whatever that ingestion point is, it can be brought in to a capture process where it can be converted to a PDF or PDFA. It's classified, the information is extracted. The tools are around that can now validate that information against existing systems of record or your ERP system, so that if you get handwritten invoices, for instance, for services provided, whatever, you can still validate that that is a vendor and that they do exist in your system, and that there is a valid service that they provided that you need to pay for. And you can do that indexing based upon the standards that you already have in place, right? So the worst thing that you can have in your shared drives, for instance, is 12345 PDF as the document name, which happens a lot when you scan something like on a multifunction device. You just go over, you scan it, you send it to yourself as an email, or you send it to a shared drive. And what the heck is it? And what happens when you've got 10 of those scanned on different dates by different people or on different machines, depending upon how you set up your multifunction devices and set up that network. You can have multiples that look like duplicates, but aren't. They're entirely different documents that have the same label. So if you take the time and put in the investment to do the indexing up front at the time that is being captured, it saves you a ton of grief later on when you have to dispose of records, according to your retention schedule, because you don't have to open up everything. It's labeled the way you want it to be. And that can all be automated. And then it can feed into the business workflow. So you can get the reviews done electronically, digitally. All that can be tracked. The approvals or the rejections and why can all be part of your information governance process, so that you can abide by those Sarbanes-Oxley rules and the Gramm-Leach-Bliley as to why you did what you did. And you're not relying on handwritten notes or marginalia on paper. And you can just keep it all neat and clean. And then if you do get into a litigation situation, you have that information to give to the lawyers as to what the business decisions were, why they were made that way, who did it, and you can lock it down so it doesn't get deleted inadvertently. But you don't have to make another copy of it that you then have to figure out what to do with once the litigation's done. It's all part of your system of record, and it's managed by your program. And then you can send it off the way you need to, and know who you sent it to. And for those documents, that you have identified as being vital, they can be backed up into your disaster recovery system so that they're there when you need them, should something happen, like an earthquake or a fire or a flood. But then they can also be managed in that other system so that those records that have lost their vitality, they've passed that critical date, they can be removed according to your schedule and then deleted, so that that vital backup doesn't have to keep building. You can manage it just like you do your regular system of record. And then for those documents that have been identified as being historic or have permanent retention, those can be saved up to a trusted system type environment, either a device or up in the cloud, depending upon what your needs are and what you're comfortable with. but they're there. And if they're those types of records that you have to keep forever, but you don't refer to them very often after their active stage, they're out of the active system. They're not getting in the way of searching, and they don't slow down the system. As you can just get them where you need them, and the tags are still in your document management system or your content management system, but you don't have to store them in the system. They're stored up in the cloud and not slowing you down. So what you're going for in an information governance program is who created it, who looked at it, what did they do with it, where is it? So you've got all locations of the system of record or convenience duplicates, because convenience duplicates have a retention, just like the original record does. And how long must you keep it? So you've got legal requirements and legal considerations. They're slightly different things. So the legal considerations are usually around a statute of limitations when it comes to contracts. There isn't usually a legal requirement in a contract of more than like 3 years past the last activity date. That's usually a clause in a contract. But within the state that you're doing business in, or the state that you've named as the state that you would do any kind of legal activity in, there may be a statute of limitations of 10 years for the plaintiff to file any kind of action against you. And then how long do you need to keep it? Again, operational considerations and historical significance to the company. Those are important. A few years ago, there was a case study at the ARMA conference for a company that manufactures food who had kept their insurance policies as a permanent record, which turned out to be very valuable because the insurance company did not. They had, discarded them 3 years after, the last date on the actual contract and then extension. And it turned out that they had a clause in the original contract of in perpetuity, is that the insurance company was covering that manufacturer in perpetuity for any kind of issue. And they tried to not pay on a claim, which is a very substantial claim, because the insurance company said, no, that we don't have to pay that because it's not in this particular contract that we have with you right now. But the manufacturer had that original, and the court said, yep, in perpetuity means in perpetuity, you got to pay up. That was a lesson for a lot of the people who attended that ARMA conference to go back to their insurance policies to make sure that they had that original one. And if not, to go to risk management and figure out what they could do to work around that or address it. And then getting back to, is it needed for business continuity? What do you need to get up and running after a disaster? And where are you going to put it? So the guideline on there is like usually 40 miles away is where the backup should be to get you out of any kind of a regional natural disaster. For something like a disease, you want to have people trained on how to get to the information as well. And the important things that I've learned over the 38 years is that compliance is a business practice. It's not a fire drill. It never works when it's a fire drill. That's very expensive to do, to bring everybody in to find the records that you need because of litigation or because of an audit, or to come in and get rid of everything because there's litigation or an audit and you don't want that information to be found. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but in Outlook now you actually have a policy that you can apply to your emails. And that's because in the European Union, when the GDPR first went out, Bill Gates was found to have emails that showed an intent that Microsoft didn't necessarily mean. So after that happened, all of a sudden, you can manage your emails in Microsoft as a business practice, not as a fire drill trying to find everything to delete. So if you're not using it, take a look at it and see if it'll help you manage your email a little bit better. And then the whole program will allow you to be audit ready. You're not going to have that fire drill. Whether it's a state, county, or federal audit that you're going through, or if you're doing a merger or an acquisition or a divestiture, at those instances, you're going to get audited, right? So the state can come in and audit you to make sure you're paying sales tax. Counties can come in to make sure you're paying your water bills, and the feds can come in if you're a federally traded company. You know, the SEC can walk in unannounced at any time. The IRS can walk in, and if an employee tells them, "Well, I work from home on a regular basis," they can go to that employee's home and take their computers on their assumption that that employee has documents there, that they've done some convenient saves. So you want to make sure that people can access your records remotely without having to take them home or put them on their own systems. And then litigation ready. So there are tools out there that allow you to monitor emails that come in for key phrases like claim, "I'm going to sue you," or "I fell," or those things that would pertain to your type of business, because you will get pushback from employees saying that's my email, that's my mail, and it's not. It's the company's mail and it's the company's email, and you have the right to go in and monitor what's coming in. And then there are the legal hold notices. You need to have them available to employees so they know that there is some type of hold on specific types of documents or specific subjects or specific people. It depends upon what the litigation is, but they need to be where people can find them. And then on the other side of that, as soon as the legal hold is lifted, it's the litigation's done or the audit's done, and there were records that came up as ready for disposition during that time frame, you need to get rid of those records as soon as that hold is lifted so that they're not put on hold again. Because once a legal action happens and it's successful, the chances of getting sued again by somebody else for that same issue are pretty high. So you need to prove again that it's a business practice, that you dispose of your records on a timely basis based upon what your program and your retention schedule have laid out. And again, all potential systems of records are identified and managed as business assets. There was a law firm here in Southern California where a lawyer created their own e-room using a cloud-based repository when they first came out. IT didn't know it existed until they did a survey of their internet, I think it was, and discovered that there was all this traffic going to this e-room. They didn't have a password. They didn't know even what the login was, and the attorney wasn't really helpful for them for quite a while. They didn't want to have IT messing with their stuff. So you need to get it communicated to your clients that, again, the records are an organizational asset, a business asset, not their personal information. Okay. I have run across a client where their records management policy was common sense. Use common sense. That's not a policy. Because in their instance, one employee's common sense was to print everything, store that in boxes, and store it in a closet where no one else knew that they existed, because that was her backup. So you need to have the procedures, what needs to be done and why. You need to tell people why. And then desktop instructions to make it as easy as possible to follow along. But, a 100-page procedure is never going to get read, but a single sheet desktop instructions with pictures will get used. And then going through the technology, the capture or ingestion and the creation of your documents, the storage and retrieval, preservation and protection. And part of that technology is determining what the format will be. You don't manage the record by the format, you manage it by the content, but you can tell people how they can store things. That a TIFF is okay, PDF is okay, or these types of documents need to be stored as PDFAs so that when they get open 10 years from now, it's going to look the same. Or you can store stuff, in microforms, and how to preserve that microform, how it has to be stored, and how you can retrieve it, print it, and the technology behind that. So all of that's part of the technology aspect of this. Training, the in-person is usually the most effective. On demand, so the person, has a question, they can go to, recorded video or recorded a saved PowerPoint, a document to go to reference. And then it should be attested. You should test them to make sure that they know what it is that they're supposed to be doing, to avoid the workarounds when they forget how to do something, and they'll end up printing, a document instead of saving it to PDF, and then they'll print it to paper and scan it back in versus just saving it to PDF to begin with. So that the training is important, and refreshers on how to do things is important. And then the education. Why? And the why improves your compliance. It also identifies risks fairly early. Why do you have to send an encrypted email when you're attaching health information or when you're attaching company secrets to that? You have to tell them why that they have to do that. It's also really helpful to show any auditor that comes in that, yes, you have trained your employees on not only the how-to, but the why. And then some industry resources that we use here at Western is ARMA. That's where you can get an Information Governance Professional Certification. AIM, which is your Certified Information Professional. ANSI, which is what the organization that co-wrote with AIM, the trusted system standard that's in use by California and some other states. And then ISO, they have a standard for records keeping, it's 15489, and that was co-written with ARMA. And that goes into, how to build a program, what goes into a policy, what goes into the procedures, what goes into desktop instructions. And then ISO also has some other standards regarding imaging, how to scan, how to create PDFs, why PDFA is the preferred format now going forward. And then we get into the commercial part of the presentation. So why choose Western? For those of you who are already customers, I think we have smarter solutions. We also have dedicated support. For those of you, again, who are Western customers, Jeremy, Miranda, they're there to help you, and they keep on it until it's fixed. And then we constantly are getting certified in the solutions that we sell, but then also the industries that we are selling to. So we have Microsoft certifications. We have our CTT, which is the Certified Technical Trainer. We have CIPs, we have IGPs, and CTT, said CTT, APMD, Accounts Payable Manager, certifications on staff. And then for those of you who do not have a records retention schedule, or it's old, it's pre-CCPA, for those of you who are either in California or have customers in California, we can help update the records retention schedule, again, so that it includes not only the legal requirements and legal considerations, but your operational requirements, and then any kind of historical value that you might have on those records. So that and the reason for that, from my point of view, is that if you take all of those requirements into consideration, the compliance with that goes up much higher, because people believe that they're understood and their needs are understood, and when a record is up for disposition, they're gonna get rid of it instead of keeping it just in case. We also do process improvement analyses for you. That's particularly valuable in accounts payable or onboarding and contract like negotiations. You know, wherever you have a lot of handoffs in a process, there's always room for improvement on that. And then the information governance aspect to it, so that you can show your senior management that yes, we are taking care of our information and we are providing you the best information possible so that you can make good decisions. And then project management services. I have a t-shirt that says professional nudger on it, because that's really what project management sometimes turns out to be. It's just nudging people to keep getting those tasks done to make the project successful. Okay, and Lyle, do we have any questions in the chat?
We do have some questions. Would you like me to read them, or what I could do is I could email the group afterwards?
I think probably emailing the group afterwards would be good, because then people don't have to take notes.
Yeah, I like that idea. What I can do is I'll send you a list of questions that came in, Cheryl. Okay. And if you want to answer them, I can send it to everyone who attended today. Okay, cool. And there is one question that I did want to answer, is that what is the #1 compliance issue you see in different industries? And I kind of brought that up during the presentation, in that people keep stuff just in case. And that keeping it just in case is what gets organizations into trouble, because those records should have been disposed of, and according to the retention schedule and the records manager, they were, and then someone comes up with a copy of what was requested. And if you're in court, that's almost automatically an adverse inference, that you were trying to hide something that would have influenced the jury to go in a different direction. So that's really the #1 issue, is keeping stuff just in case, because their needs weren't considered when the retention schedule was originally written. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending today. I appreciate your time, and we appreciate you.